Who did this to you?
I won't let you die. Whoever did this will pay.
You'll save me?
You'll save me?
The desert lay wide and merciless, a sweep of scorched earth under a sky the color of bleached bone. Wind poured through the canyons like a restless spirit, lifting red dust into the air and sending it swirling over jagged rock. Each gust carried the taste of iron and grit, rasping at the throat, howling through dead branches that clawed the sky. There was no sound of life but for the measured strike of hooves and the creak of worn leather. A lone rider pressed forward, his hat brimmed, shadowing eyes darkened by years of battle. The soldier bore the weight of silence on his shoulders, the kind forged by gunfire and graves, by promises carved into his soul. He moved as one more scar in the endless land, neither celebrated nor welcomed, only endured. Yet with each step of his horse, he carried the quiet gravity of a man who still believed in something unbroken, though the world around him had crumbled. It was the hollow outline of a settlement that caught his eye. Sagging timbers, roofs half collapsed, windows punched through like empty sockets. The air here felt different, heavy with abandonment and some lingering shadow of violence. His horse shifted uneasily, ears flicking as though it heard voices that were no longer there. The soldier drew rein, scanning the silent ruin. Then he saw her. At first she was only a bundle against the cracked wall of an old storehouse, a shape swallowed in rags. But as he approached, the bundle moved, shuddered, and resolved into the outline of a woman bound at the wrists. Her hair hung wild across her face, matted with sweat and dust, but when she lifted her head, her eyes burned with a plea sharper than any blade. Her lips parted, cracked from thirst, and out came words that cut the air colder than the desert wind. "Kill me fast." No tremor of hesitation, no disguise of metaphor, only the raw demand of someone who had abandoned hope. The soldier froze, rein slack in his hand. He had heard cries for help, pleas for mercy, prayers muttered before death, but never that. "Kill me fast," she whispered again, as if begging him to grant her a mercy more precious than life itself. His chest tightened, the soldier's grip tightening on the rifle across his saddle. It was not death she feared. Death would have been release. What she dreaded was still behind her eyes, still hunting her even as she sat shackled to the dust. He dismounted slowly, boots sinking into sand that whispered with each step. "Who did this to you?" His voice came low, gravel-worn thin. She shook her head violently, hair scattering across her face like a veil. "Don't ask. Just end it. Please." Her wrists twisted against the rope, but she did not reach for him, did not cling. She only recoiled as though even his shadow might bring the thing she feared closer. He crouched before her, his face drawn with fatigue but sharpened by suspicion. His gaze ran over her frame, ragged dress torn at the shoulder, dirt embedded deep in her skin, the faint lines of old bruises painted over her arms. These were not the marks of desert travel. They were the marks of cruelty. His stomach coiled. She turned her face away as though even being seen was a wound. Overhead, vultures traced their circles, black wings carving the sky. The soldier's jaw tightened as one drifted lower, its shadow falling across the woman like a gravecloth. He pulled a canteen from his belt and pressed it to her lips. She resisted for a heartbeat, then drank greedily, water spilling over her chin. When he pulled it back, she gasped and whispered again, "You shouldn't have stopped. They'll come. They always come. You'll die for nothing." Her voice cracked into a sob she tried to swallow down, her shoulders trembling beneath the ruined cloth. The soldier rose slowly, his boots grinding grit. "I've died a dozen times already," he muttered, more to himself than to her. "Still here." He reached for the rope binding her wrists. She jerked away, terror sparking in her eyes. "Don't. Please, don't. If they see me free." She bit her lip, words choking off, as though the very air might carry them back to her captors. He cut the ropes anyway. The strands fell to the sand with a whisper. She did not move to run. Instead, she collapsed forward, catching herself on trembling hands, her breath coming sharp and shallow. The soldier crouched again, eyes narrowing as he studied the patterns written across her skin. Bruises not from accident but from deliberate cruelty, lash marks scored deep into her back and shoulders. Scars that told a story no voice dared to. He had seen men in uniform whipped by their own for desertion, branded like cattle for disobedience. His hands trembled slightly as memories pressed into him, but he pushed them aside, focused on her. "Tell me," he said, steady but insistent. She shook her head, tears burning trails down dust-caked cheeks. "No. You don't understand. It's worse if you know." He waited, silence stretching between them, filled only by the restless groan of the wind through the ghost town beams. His gaze swept the empty street, shattered saloon doors swaying on rusted hinges, a sign creaking with every gust. It was a place that had known lawlessness, where cruelty had laid claim to every corner. A place fitting for the kind of man who would leave a woman to beg for death. His gut burned. He looked back at her, and this time, when he spoke, his voice was not gentle. "Stand." She flinched, her head shaking hard. "Please, don't make me." He reached down and caught her elbow, pulling her gently but firmly to her feet. Her body was weak, swaying against him like a reed in wind. She pushed at him feebly, sobbing. "No, no, you don't want to see. Please, don't look." But he did. In the moment that followed, silence folded over them like a shroud. His eyes caught the mark, hidden beneath the torn hem of her skirt. It was not the mark of accident, nor the casual cruelty of a whip. It was deliberate, a searing brand burned deep into her flesh. The shape of it twisted, cruel and unmistakable, the sign of ownership stamped by men who called themselves lords of the desert, an outlaw gang feared across the frontier. His breath hissed through his teeth, fury hardening his gaze. She crumpled, covering her face with both hands, sobbing not from pain but from the unbearable shame of being seen. The soldier's hands curled into fists. Every mile of desert, every scar on his own flesh, seemed to sharpen into one truth: no man, no beast, no devil had the right to lay claim on another's soul. He lowered himself to one knee before her, his shadow stretching long in the failing light. His voice, though soft, carried the weight of iron. "As long as I draw a breath, no man owns you." Her sobs faltered, caught between disbelief and the faintest flicker of hope. He rose, scanning the horizon where dusk bled into night, where he knew riders would soon appear with guns and chains. His jaw tightened, his hand resting on the warm grip of his revolver. The desert wind shrieked through the ghost town timbers, rattling them like bones. Vultures drifted farther out, as if they sensed the storm building. And in the soldier's chest, beneath scars that had long since numbed him, a fire stirred. It burned fierce, not for himself but for her, for the brand seared into her flesh, for the cruelty carved into her spirit, for the plea that had asked for death when she still had life to claim. In that fire he found his answer, and it was vengeance. The sun bled itself dry against the horizon, painting the desert in hues of fire and ash. Long shadows stretched across the jagged cliffs, swallowing the land in creeping darkness as though night itself rode in early. The soldier tightened the reins, his horse shifting under the weight of two. The woman clung to him not out of trust but out of exhaustion, her body weak and trembling from the struggle of survival. She whispered protests against his chest, voice thin with fear. "They'll find me. They always do. You don't understand. They'll hunt us until we're dust." But he only set his jaw harder, his eyes cutting through the dying light. "Then let them come," he muttered, low as a vow. He pressed the horse forward, hooves striking the trail like a drumbeat of defiance. The land opened into a world of sharp ridges and red stone canyons, the kind that swallowed men whole and spat out their bones decades later. Dry wind whipped the soldier's coat against his legs, filling the air with grit that stung the eyes. Coyotes howled in the distance, carried on the edge of the wind like warning cries. Each mile felt like walking deeper into a furnace, yet the soldier did not slow. The woman buried her face into his back as if to hide from the world, her hair catching on the rough wool of his coat. The desert was merciless, but he knew mercy lay nowhere behind them. To linger was to invite chains. To move forward was the only hope, however faint. By nightfall, they found a hollow of stone sheltered from the wind. The soldier gathered dry sagebrush and set flame to it, the crackling fire spitting sparks into the star-pricked dark. The woman sat across from him, arms drawn tight around herself. Her eyes glistened with the reflection of the flames, but her voice came like iron broken under too much weight. "They took me from the trail," she began, her words halting as though each one carried splinters. "My family, we were moving west. Wagons stretched for miles. We thought we'd outrun the wars, the hunger. But the desert doesn't let anyone outrun what it wants." She stared into the flames as if searching for the faces of the lost. They came at dawn. Guns, masks, voices like thunder. Men fell where they stood, My father. Her throat closed. She pressed a hand to her mouth, forcing the sob back down, but her eyes burned bright with the memory. They branded me. Said it was their mark, their promise that I belonged to them. That no one would dare take me back. I learned to stay silent, because every word I spoke cost someone blood. I wanted death more than once, but they never gave it. Only more chains. Her voice cracked, a whisper dragging across the embers. That's why I begged you. Better to die free than live with their brand. The soldier listened without shifting, his gaze locked on her though his face remained stone. Each word struck him like the echo of a whip, branding him in places scars could not cover. His own war had left him carrying ghosts, but the cruelty in her story seared deeper than anything he had seen on the battlefield. He let the silence settle between them, the fire popping softly, the desert wind moaning through the canyon teeth. Finally, he spoke. You're not theirs. Not now. Not ever again. His voice was rough, but there was something beneath it, an iron oath that reached across the fire and steadied her shaking frame. She closed her eyes, tears cutting silent lines down her face. Before dawn, the first sound of pursuit found them, the distant rumble of hooves against stone, muffled but unmistakable. The soldier was already awake, saddle cinched, rifle strapped across his back. He touched her shoulder gently. Time to move. She rose without protest, though her eyes darted nervously toward the horizon. They mounted quickly, and the horse lunged forward into the winding paths of the mesas. The land stretched wide and treacherous, dry riverbeds choked with thorns, cliffs carved sharp as blades, pine ridges rising where the desert gave way to higher air. Behind them, the dust cloud rose. Riders. The chase became a rhythm of pounding hearts and pounding hooves. The soldier urged the horse faster, weaving through ravines where shadows swallowed them whole, splashing through shallow streams that gleamed silver under the sun. The woman clung to him, her eyes wide as rifle shots cracked behind them, echoing off canyon walls like thunder. Bullets struck stone, shattering it into sparks. Once, the air beside her face split with a whine, the bullet close enough to tear strands of her hair loose. She buried her face against his back, muffling a scream, but the soldier only leaned lower over the horse's neck, his jaw set like granite. They pushed through pine ridges where the air grew cooler, the scent of sap mingling with gun smoke. Twice he turned, firing shots that rang through the trees, forcing the riders to scatter. Still they came, black silhouettes against the burning sky, their shouts carrying like curses through the canyon wind. The soldier's horse faltered once, hooves slipping on loose gravel, but he steadied it with a grip born of years in the saddle. His pulse beat in time with the gunfire, each second stretching into a battle for survival. At last, the trail narrowed into a canyon so tight the walls rose sheer on both sides, hemming them in with no way forward but straight through. The soldier swung down, pulling her with him. "This is where we stand," he said, voice as steady as the rock around them. She shook her head, fear widening her eyes. "They'll kill you." "There are too many," he cut her off with a look, sharp as the edge of his knife. "Not today." He shoved the horse forward into a hidden crack between boulders, slapping its flank to send it clear of the fight. Then he turned, rifle in hand, eyes fixed on the bend where the riders thundered nearer. The first shots came in a storm. Bullets tore into the canyon walls, throwing up clouds of dust and shards of stone. The soldier dropped to one knee, returning fire in measured bursts, every shot clean, every strike precise. Men fell from saddles, horses screamed, the canyon echoing with chaos. Yet more riders surged forward, their faces twisted with rage, guns blazing. The woman crouched low behind a boulder, hands pressed to her ears, until one outlaw crept close along the wall, gun raised at the soldier's exposed flank. She saw him before the soldier did. Terror flooded her veins, but something sharper rose beneath it, a spark of defiance. She seized a loose rock with both hands, her knuckles white, and hurled it with every ounce of strength. It struck the outlaw square in the temple. He toppled, gun discharging into the dust before his body collapsed. The soldier glanced back, eyes locking with hers. For the first time, she wasn't only afraid, there was fire in her, raw and unsteady, but burning all the same. He gave a single nod, as though recognizing the birth of something she had forgotten she possessed. Then he turned back, rifle barking in defiance, each shot pushing the enemy farther from their prey. When at last the canyon fell silent but for the ringing in their ears and the groan of wounded men crawling in the dust, the soldier lowered his gun. Smoke drifted in thin trails from the barrel, his chest rising and falling like a bellows. She stared at him, heart hammering, the stone still clutched in her trembling hand. "They'll come again," she whispered. He wiped grit from his brow, reloading with practiced ease. His voice, low and certain, carried no room for doubt. "Then we end them all. Not just for you. For every soul they've branded, every voice they've silenced. This trail doesn't end until they do." And in that canyon, beneath the red cliffs painted with blood and dust, vengeance took root, not as rage alone, but as a promise carved deep into the bones of the frontier. The road wound down from the canyon into a town that seemed carved from dust and despair. Its buildings leaned with age, sun-baked boards creaking beneath the weight of memory. Doors hung crooked, paint peeled, and windows reflected nothing but the emptiness of souls who had long forgotten hope. The soldier rode in with a woman beside him, her face hidden beneath a shawl, but even hidden she drew stares. Whispers curled through the street like snakes, not her name, not pity, only recognition of the brand that burned her identity into flesh. To them she was not a woman but property, marked and condemned. Mothers pulled their children closer, men turned away, shopkeepers shut doors with a guilty slam. Silence thickened, heavy as smoke, until it was clear no one here would raise a hand, not against the gang that had owned this town for years. The soldier's jaw clenched. He stepped down into the street, dust rising at his boots, his hand gripping the rifle slung across his back. "You see her." His voice carried, cutting through the hush like a blade. Faces turned, eyes lowered. "You know what that mark means. You know who did it. And still you cower." He pointed at the woman, who shrank beneath her shawl. "You let them brand her soul and you looked away. That makes you as guilty as the man who held the iron." His words struck hard, rattling in the ribs of every coward within earshot. None answered. The only reply came from shutters slamming closed, as if hiding would absolve them. The soldier spat into the dust. "Then I'll fight alone." The sun reached its peak, burning white fire overhead, when the sound came, a distant thunder of hooves, steady and sure. The ground trembled, glasses rattled in saloons, dogs skulked beneath porches. The gang rode in like a storm, dust clouds boiling behind them, rifles flashing in the glare. Their leader, a broadman with a jagged scar twisting across his jaw, reined in at the center of a main street. His smile was cruel, mocking. "Brought her back, did you?" His gaze raked over the woman, tearing at her like claws. "She belongs to us. Step aside, soldier." The soldier stepped into the street, his shadow stretching long and thin under the noon sun. His rifle rested loose in his hand, not raised, not lowered, waiting. "No one owns her," he said, voice steady, each word carrying the weight of the desert behind it. The gang laughed, cruel and sharp, but unease prickled among them. Something in his stance, the quiet certainty of a man who had buried too many to count, stilled their mockery. The silence split with the crack of a gun. Dust exploded at the soldier's feet. Then chaos erupted. Rifles barked, pistols flared, and the street became a battlefield. The soldier dropped to one knee, rifle pressed to his shoulder, and fired with the precision of a man who had survived wars. One rider pitched from his saddle, another spun with a scream as lead found flesh. The gang charged, hooves pounding, bullets screaming past like hornets. The woman crouched behind a trough, fists clenched, eyes wide with terror and something else, hope, sharp and dangerous. The soldier moved like iron wrapped in flesh, unyielding. He reloaded with the calm of habit, fired with the fury of justice, each shot finding its mark. Men toppled, horses reared, the gang's thunder breaking into fragments. But still they pressed, shouting curses, spitting rage. One closed the distance, revolver flashing. The soldier spun, drew his sidearm, and dropped him before he could fire again. The woman gasped as another outlaw dismounted and charged with a knife. She seized a fallen pistol, hand shaking, and fired wild. The shot went wide, but it startled him long enough for the soldier's bullet to end him. The battle dragged seconds into eternities. Smoke and dust hung thick, turning the noon into a hazy nightmare. The leader bellowed, rallying the last of his men. "She's ours. Take her." He raised his rifle, but the soldier's shot struck first, snapping his head back, dropping him into the dirt. For a heartbeat the world froze, the sound of his fall louder than the gunfire itself. Then silence spread, heavy and final. The last outlaws turned and fled, their hooves fading like thunder moving away across the plains. The street stank of blood and gunpowder. The soldier stood unmoving, chest heaving, smoke drifting from the barrel of his gun. Bodies lay strewn in the dust, the gang's reign of terror broken in the space of a single hour. Slowly, The townsfolk crept from their hiding places, eyes wide, voices hushed. They looked not at the corpses but at the soldier who still stood, shadow long against the sun, and at the woman who had not begged for death this time, but clutched the pistol as though it were a piece of her own reborn strength. The soldier turned to her, his face drawn but resolute. He dropped to one knee beside her, pulling a knife from his belt. The blade flashed in the sunlight as he pressed it into the fire-blackened iron from a smith's forge nearby. The heat shimmered, the metal glowing red. She froze, terror flooding her eyes as she realized his intent. "No," she whispered, trembling. "Not again." His gaze softened, not with pity but with a fierce, unbreakable promise. "Not to mark you. To erase them." She hesitated, then nodded, tears trembling at the edge of her lashes. He pressed the iron against the old brand. The sear hissed, smoke rising, her cry breaking through the silence of the town. But beneath the pain was release, the iron biting not to claim her, but to set her free. She clutched his arm, nails digging deep, her scream shattering into sobs. When it was done, she collapsed against him, trembling but unshackled. The brand was gone. In its place, a scar remained, not of ownership, but of survival. He held her as her sobs eased, his rough hand steady against her back. Her voice, fragile yet stronger than it had ever been, rose against his chest. "Don't leave me." Not a plea for death. A plea for life, for something beyond pain. He closed his eyes, feeling the weight of her words settle into the marrow of his bones. "I won't," he said simply, as if swearing it to the desert itself. And so the tale lived on, carried in the whispers of those who saw it. They spoke of the soldier who walked into a town bound by silence and broke the chains no one else dared touch. They told of a woman who once begged for death but found instead the fire of life rekindled in her. The legend spread like wine through the frontier, told by firelight, sung in the hush between battles. And they say, when the desert wind howls across the canyons, you can still hear her whisper, no longer begging for death, but for the life he gave back to her.